You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
I thought you might have some ideas.
Why should I tell you?
You get to see the file on this case. And there's another reason.
Pray tell.
Thought you might be curious to see if you're smarter than the person I'm looking for.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you caught me.
No. I know that I'm not smarter than you.
Then how did you catch me?
You had disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
This is absolutely a true story, and a little long, so bear with me. There was an old abandoned warehouse in my old hometown that was well known to be supposedly haunted. There were numerous origin stories floating around as to why it was haunted, and one was that the old owner employed slaves to work his field, and one day he just went crazy and started hanging them all from the rafters. Another was that a group of teenagers were playing a game of D&D upstairs, and one kid just went off the rails and drove an axe through another player's skull. Regardless of what really happened there were always weird fucking things going on in that place. On one occasion, me and some friends went to check it out at night, and in the middle of the main room, there was a dead dog on the ground with a stick shoved straight through its stomach. Out back, we found the skeletal remains of a cat, but someone had attached bird wings to it. As we headed back inside, all of a sudden it started raining inside the building. I mean, not a mist or something that could come from a sprinkler system at all. It was legit raining hard inside this place. And this was on a really clear night with no clouds in the sky and not one drop of rain outside the place. It didn't make sense for any of this to be happening. Then we heard what sounded like human whimpers coming from the upstairs area. So we called out to see if someone needed help. But the whimpers stopped, only to turn into what sounded like a little girl giggling. We hightailed it out of there right then and there. Later, me and my best friend finally got our nerve to go back to this place about a month later, but this time we went in the daylight. We did bring flashlights because it was pitch black in the main area, and we didn't want to trip over anything. We noticed that the dead dog that had been there before was gone this time, so someone must have moved it. We made our way up a few small stairs that led to a big loading dock type of room. We had our flashlights scanning the floor just to make sure nothing was there, and we didn't find anything interesting. From where we were standing, there was a big metal staircase in front of us that led up to a catwalk about 25 feet high, which gave us a full view of the room from where we were standing below it. I started scanning my light from left to right to see if anything was up there, and I noticed a few boxed crates and a barrel of some sort. But then, all of a sudden, I noticed the reflection of eyes gleaming back at me. I told my friend that something was up there, and he put his flashlight to where mine was, and with both of our lights shining on this thing, we could finally see what it was. And to this day, I still can't explain what the hell we saw. It looked to be about 3 or 4 feet tall, covered in hair and walking upright like a human. In the moment, I made a quick joke out of fear to lighten the mood and said, "What the fuck? That thing looks like Alf, man." And my friend also chuckled nervously. We watched as this thing paced back and forth up on the catwalk for about a minute. It made no sound at all and just walked to the left, and then it would stop, and then turn around and walk to the right. We were completely captivated by whatever this thing was. And suddenly, it turned sharply and glared directly at us. Its eyes stared directly into our lights, and it cocked its head to the side as if it was studying us. Then, in a quick flash, it darted towards the big metal staircase that would lead down to where we were. We panicked and ran as fast as we could, while behind us we heard the echoes of each footstep hitting each step of that staircase. As we reached the exit, we both heard a deep booming laugh that literally shook the whole building. We jumped into our car, locked the doors, and stared back at the doorway we had just escaped from, expecting to see that creature there waiting. But there was nothing. I still have no explanation for what we experienced that day, and we vowed that we'd never go back to that place. This happened 15 years ago, and I still find myself picturing that thing's face when I close my eyes at night, and it still scares the hell out of me to this day. I have a problem with night terrors and sleep paralysis. Keep in mind that for most of my life, I never knew about night terrors or sleep paralysis, and only recently learned about them within the last few years. I thought I was cursed or haunted, even possessed, for a good chunk of my younger years. The first time I really remember having one, I was asleep in the house I grew up in. That house has its own creepy stories I might tell some other time. I was in the bottom bunk bed. I jolted awake, but I couldn't move, and this puppet-looking thing, like the mean lady puppet from Mr. Rogers, but wrong, just very, 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 very wrong, popped up on the side of the bed and was just there taunting me and scaring me. And I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do anything. I had them again on and off for years, mostly when I've stayed up too late or am stressed out. I remember another such time vividly, maybe 15 years later. I had the night terror and that inability to move, and the feeling that there was something that was about to kill me right then and there. I was much older, a freshman in college, home for Thanksgiving, but not the house I grew up in. My parents had divorced my senior year of high school, and my mother had sold the house while I was away during fall term. Anyway, I had fallen asleep late. Again, I woke up, but couldn't move. I started panicking, but this time, instead of waking up the rest of the way as usual and being unable to sleep for a good long time, something else happened. I managed to calm down, but stay in my dream. I was walking through this new house, down the hall, and I opened a door, and I was in a completely different place. It was very ornate, very gothic looking, but the stone quickly gave way to dripping flesh and bone as I progressed through the building. Demonic imps were skittering about, and a very large horned demon was all of a sudden headed my way. I ran, but could only find myself in a maze surrounded by these crazy noises from hell. Finally, I really panicked, and I heard laughter, just this vicious laughter. In response, I started reciting the Lord's Prayer. All the noise stopped, and all I could hear was my voice echoing through the halls, saying the Lord's Prayer over and over, almost like a round. Our Father who art in heaven, repeating and mixing with the rest of the prayer, echoing deafeningly. That's when I finally woke up, and I didn't have another one for about a year. If I felt like I was slipping into one, I'd say the Lord's Prayer and manage to avoid it. The next one I had was really bad, probably the worst I'd ever had. I felt that typical presence there with me, but it was different this time. I mean, horribly different. I felt like death was there to take me. I felt like I was literally dying, not just scared, but about to die. I mean, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, and I imagined my heart was about to burst in absolute fear and just kill me. But it finally passed, and I went another few months without one. Unfortunately, whatever is wired weird in my brain is not forgiving in the least. The next major one I had, I was dating the woman that is now my wife. We'd been together for a few weeks and had fallen asleep, and as I turned over, I opened my eyes and her back was to me. But in the middle of her back was just a hole, black with these smoky tendrils crawling out of it. And all of a sudden, the tendrils go taut, like they're straining to pull, and a face leaps out of the hole in her back, screaming at me, and I screamed in return and pushed her away. She asked me what the fuck had happened, and I explained the problem I have with sleep sometimes. She understood, and to this day, she usually manages to wake me up from them. Usually, but not always. A few years back, my then boyfriend and I took a short trip to Las Vegas. We stayed at this hotel, which I won't mention here, but it was a pretty popular hotel right on the strip. As soon as we got into the room, I went to turn on the AC. I always like a hotel room to be at a very cool temperature. After we unpacked, we went down and grabbed some food and drinks and did some gambling before heading back to our room. We got ready for bed, turned off the lights, and I suddenly heard or felt something weird. It was within seconds my boyfriend sat straight up and screamed. I didn't think he was already asleep yet because we had just barely laid down. So I asked him what was the matter, and he mumbled that he just had a bad dream. I thought that was weird because, like I said, how could he have been asleep already within 10 seconds of going to bed? I let it go, and it took me about 20 minutes before I fell asleep. And I think it was not long after I did fall asleep, I started sweating. It felt super warm in the room, and that totally woke me up. I went to crank up the AC, and then went back to bed. But after a while, I felt super cold, and I got up to turn the AC down. And to make the story shorter, the room temperature kept changing the whole night, and I barely got 2 hours of sleep. I didn't feel well at all, and I felt like something was present in that room's balcony. So the next morning we got up, went to grab a bite to eat, and shopped a little, and then headed back to the room to freshen up. Let me set the scenario here for you. The room was just like any other standard hotel room, with a TV and a cabinet in front of the bed, and there were 2 chairs on either side of the cabinet. My then boyfriend was sitting on the chair on the right side of the cabinet while I was sitting on the bed watching TV. I think it was around 6 in the evening, and I was just surfing the channels to see what was on. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something standing on the left side of the TV cabinet. And at first, I really didn't think there was actually something there, so I rubbed my eyes a little and pretended to not be looking. You know, we all have peripheral vision, so even when I was staring straight at the TV, I could see that something from the corner of my eye, and what I saw was a little boy standing there. He was not in a very clear form, but I knew it was a little boy. I was so scared at that moment, I said to my then boyfriend, "We have to leave." He said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Don't ask. We have to change rooms." So I got up, went to the phone, and called down to the reception's desk. I told the person that I needed to change rooms right away, and he asked me if something was wrong. I told him, "There is something in this room," and right after I said that, the TV shut down and made a super loud sound like an explosion. I mean, my boyfriend jumped up, and the person on the phone asked if we needed help with our luggage. I said no, we just needed to get out. We ran out of the room and down to the hotel lobby, and I asked the person that was helping us if she had ever had another complaint that there was something weird in that room. And the person said that she didn't know of anything, but there are so many staff, she wouldn't really know. We had someone come up to our room with us to see us pack and move to a new room. It was after we were there in the new room that my then boyfriend told me what really happened the night before. He said he didn't want to scare me, and that's why he didn't say anything. He told me that after he had laid down to bed, something came flying right at him from the balcony, so he jumped up and screamed. He said whatever it was on top of him, and he felt paralyzed. It couldn't have been a dream either, because like I said, it was within 10 seconds after he laid down. I told him that the whole night, whatever it was playing with the AC, and we both agreed that it was a little boy's spirit, and he was not very nice. He wanted us out of that room for some reason, and still, today, I can remember what it looked like. He was not actually standing on the ground. He was very much in human form, and yet you still know that he's not while you're seeing it. To this day, whenever I think about it, I still get goosebumps.